I just want to say, I did a little bit of rehearsing for this today. I should have done more. I have not had to do a presentation like this since college, which was 10 years ago, more or less. Bless. So just bear with me. Well, everybody, welcome to Return to Greenvale. And to begin, I have a special presentation here that I've put together that will explain everything. This is my history with Swery's stupid Twin Peaks knockoff video game that I remember being really good. Let's begin. So first we gotta go back. Back to 2010, 2011, or something, who can tell? I was just a little guy. You know, 15 to 17, somewhere in there, depending on the year and the time of year. You know, who could ever say? I loved my Xbox 360. Mostly. It has some great games on it, and I loved. I got that shit with Dead Rising for Christmas. Great time. A lot of times on this. And there's a man named Obama in the White House. And a little channel on the TV called Hub. So, at this point in my life, I should mention now, this is going to get very personal. I'm going to be very open. That's another thing that is kind of a big deal about this game. And this was not a great time for me. I was dealing with general growing up stuff of like, oh, I don't like things as much as when I was a kid, and everything sucks a little more. The kind of stuff I wouldn't really fully get over for another decade or more. But I was also dealing with a lot of mental illness stuff, your ADHD, your OCD, which I didn't even know I had yet, your depression, which I think I also didn't even know I had yet. It was kind of just the ADHD, and taking meds for it that did not work and made me feel worse. It was also a not great era for video games. I would argue that the 360 PS3 era, the HD era, might have been the worst era for video games. You know, a lot of gray shooters. Just people weren't allowed to put colors into video games, and everything had to be like just beyond stripped down, stupid mass appeal. Like, we still have a lot of problems with that stuff in games today, but it was worse. I think it was worse, especially with like even the Japanese games being like, we gotta appeal to the Western COD crowd, make everything stupid. Hideki Kamiya is gonna ruin games for everyone for like 6 years. So in this era, anything that was like a weird, remind me of like a PS2 game, like, oh, you're actually doing something, it's weird, it's experimental. That stuff really stood out, like Earth Defense Force 2017, the first EDF we got in America, the first I ever played, also known as EDF 3, that game was fantastic, it really, really stood out. Yeah, you could argue the Dark Souls games were also kind of like that. So obviously anything weird like that would really stand out, even though there was also a lot of garbage that fell into that category, like your Vampire Rain or whatever it was called. You know, stuff that was just like completely busted. Which leads me to the star of the night, Deadly Premonition, also known as Red Seed's Profile in Japan. Came out in 2010. Weird budget title, ambitious. Like a lot of people, I discovered this game through word of mouth. You know, people saying, "Oh, have you heard about this weird, like, oh, it's so stupid and funny. Look at the funny coffee scene. Like, it's so funny." You know, I found the game through word of mouth, like just about everybody. It was also very cheap. I think this is only like $20 or $30 new when it released, so it's very easy to get as well. So me and two friends were gonna go through it. You know, it's gonna be a thing we play together whenever we hang out. Yeah, great point, Jay. The cover is nothing. I think the Japanese cover is a bit better. The American cover, literally nonsense. Not a thing. Not a thing that happens in the game. It's like clip art. It is very Saw-like. But anyway, me and a couple friends were gonna go through it, but we didn't really stick with it. We had maybe a couple sessions and we had our laps, but didn't really stick through with it. Went on the shelf for could have been a year, could have been a couple months. Time was weird back then. Shit, you know, it's weird trying to remember how far apart events were during that period, because things moved a lot slower. But anyway, one day, I don't know if it was the weekend or after school, I'm bored in my room. I just randomly pulled it off the shelf. I think maybe I'd heard it was actually kind of pretty good. I'd heard some friends talking about it. I think it might have actually been my friend Tombstone in chat who was maybe like, hey, I played through this. It was actually really good. And I was like, well, maybe I'll give it a shot. So I pulled it off the shelf, pick up from where we left off, which was very early in, just like 2 or 3 hours into the game, honestly. And I loved it. I adored it completely. I felt like a kid again, which was something I was kind of obsessed with chasing at that time. And I just, front to back, like, enjoyed it in a way I hadn't enjoyed playing, like, you know, Sonic Adventure 2 or Gotcha Force on the GameCube when I was like 10 or 11 or something, you know? It was crazy. I hadn't felt anything like that for so long. I, you know, didn't think it was something I would feel again, and it like, shook me. I was like, wow. I just blasted through it over the course of 2 days. I even stayed home from school the second day. I remember I had, like, a deal with my dad, like, hey, this is, you know, might have been, like, my last year of high school or something. I was like, hey, Dad, what if this year I get 1 day I can just choose to take off? And I did it to finish Deadly Premonition, and it was amazing. Flash forward a few years, I would end up streaming this game a couple times, back in, like, the live stream days, like, pre-Twitch, having a normal capture card. I was using, like, weird jank bullshit. Actually, no, I think I might have gotten my current capture card to stream this game, now that I say that. While this was certainly not the first game I ever streamed, I think it was the first full playthrough I ever streamed, back in, like, it might have been 2012 or 2013, and then I would have done it again in, like, 2014. So, kinda has, you know, some connection to where I am today. Livestream was great. But, you know, this is a fantastic game, and it ended up being the first discovery I had of a little micro-genre that I like to call games that just seem like goofy bullshit, but have a surprisingly strong emotional core and are genuinely good, that feature Jeff Kramer as the main central character. Currently, the only other game in this genre that I can think of is Seaman, which, if you have not actually played Seaman, please play through Seaman. It's actually really good. Also not a part of this genre, but Jeff Kramer is all over those early Armored Cores, and that's kind of funny, just hearing his voice. Now we have to talk about the big boy behind it all. Swery 65, or Hidetaka Suehiro, not really sure you pronounce his last name. He directed, designed, and wrote, along with someone named Kinji Goda, Deadly Premonition. For a while, this guy was up there, for me, with Hideo Kojima and Suda51. He was a guy whose name was all over the thing he directed, and I loved the thing he directed, and I was like, wow, this guy's crazy! He seems so weird and cool and funny! I want to, like, check out everything he's done, and I looked into some of his other games. None of them really clicked with me fully. I do want to revisit some of them, but, you know, that's something for another day. Now, it's worth mentioning I did say he was up there with those guys for me. And this is the worst picture of the man I could find, and I intentionally chose it out of a intentional action of disrespect to this, you know, guy. Because now we gotta talk about something that's a lot less fun, and that's that Swery kinda sucks. So, several years ago, back in 2018, there was a guy named Matt Kahn, who had to step down from the board of GamerX, and as the CEO of Midboss after allegations of sexual misconduct, underpaying workers, and workplace harassment. For some reason, Swery got very buddy-buddy with this guy, and he even ended up being listed as an advisor in the game The Missing J.J. McField and the Island of Memories, which I believe is a game that Swery didn't actually have that much to do with, and I hear a lot of good things about. But for whatever reason, Swery was palling around with this guy, and I wanted to source this properly, but you're just gonna have to take my word for it because I could not find the tweets, but I distinctly remember that when people tried to bring this up to Swery, he got really weirdly defensive about, like, hey, this guy you're hanging out with was like a sex creep who had to get fired and was like shitty to his employees. And, you know, just hanging out with his creep friends. I believe Matt Kahn also hangs out with other known video game creeps like Nick Robinson and stuff. There's also more to it. There's a lot of nonsense in Swery's games that you'd think would have improved over the years and seemingly never got better. Deadly Premonition 2 had to have transphobic stuff patched out of it. Swery's handling of these kind of themes has, to me, always been clumsy at best, but somehow felt like he kind of meant well. Yet it seems like, going from Deadly Premonition and onwards, he never really improved with his handling of it, and if anything, maybe got worse. Yes, Tomb, that's another great point. People pointed out, like, hey, you got a lot of problems in Deadly Premonition 2, and he just kind of yelled at people like, you don't understand nothing. It very much gave me the impression that Swery is someone who wants to look cool and woke for brownie points, rather than actually listening to people and trying to tell stories about... Like, he once said he wants to show all kinds of different people in his works. And I think he does, but I'm not sure if it's for the best reasons, or if he's, you know, as aware of how poorly he handles a lot of this stuff as he should be. Also worth mentioning, Deadly Premonition 2, I've only played a little bit of. It didn't seem very good, and then once this stuff started coming out, and I hadn't even gotten to this part, I kind of fell off of it. I did, however, read an article that talked about how one of the main things people talk about Deadly Premonition 2 is a scene where the protagonist dead names a trans woman. And the person who wrote this article mentions that aspect was actually a little bit overblown, but there's other problems surrounding the character that people didn't talk about. Like, it's still not great. One day I think I would like to try and go through Deadly Premonition 2, but, you know. Point is, Swery doesn't seem like the best guy, and that's something I've had to reckon with since he made something that was very important to me, and that's kind of one of the things we're dealing with here. Anyway, moving on. Now it is time to talk about something you cannot avoid talking about when you're talking about Deadly Premonition, and that is Twin Peaks, David Lynch's early 1990s TV show. Directed by David Lynch, this ran from 1990 to 1991, and then the film Fire Walk With Me came out in 1992. Part of the reason this stream took so long is that I wanted to actually finally watch Twin Peaks. And it kind of took me a minute to do it because I was trying to do it with some friends, you know. It's a show I tried watching multiple times after getting into Deadly Premonition, and I always loved it whenever I watched it, but it was not until last year when my friends Melody and Cypress and I watched through the show together, or at least season 1. We watched the season 1 together because it's short and, like, perfect. Then we hit season 2, and season 2's twice as long and half as good, so I kind of just watched that on my own until I got to the movie, and then I watched that with Melody again. But that's not important. Point is, I have now finally watched original Twin Peaks. Season 2 is better. Incorrect. Sorry. Incorrect. Yeah, no one spoiled Twin Peaks. No one spoiled Deadly Premonition. No one spoiled anything. I should have said this up top. No spoilers for anything. This is my 4th playthrough of Deadly Premonition, and I've watched all of original Twin Peaks. I will only be talking about this stuff as we get to it. There are people in chat who have not played or watched either of these things. I do not want them getting spoiled unless, like, we come to something relevant in the plot and I have to talk about it. Fun fact, if I remember right, the Twin Peaks International DVD release didn't happen until late 2000s, which explains why probably both Sam Lake and Swery got obsessed with it. Interesting. That makes a lot of sense. But I know Twin Peaks, I think, was still big in Japan. Anyway, moving on. The connections between Twin Peaks and Deadly Premonition are many and obvious. You've got Agent Dale Cooper, who is obviously a big source of inspiration for Agent Francis York Morgan. You know, both FBI agents going to a small town to investigate a grisly murder. You've got Sheriff's Deputy Andy and Sheriff's Deputy Thomas. Both kind of soft, gentle, but extremely lovable characters that are probably my favorite characters in both of the respective things. Then you've got Laura Palmer and Anna Grom, the victims. Again, very obvious, just, you know, the young high school girl who is murdered and shocks the community. And there's even more obvious examples. But there are also less obvious inspirations that I now am aware of since I've watched Twin Peaks. So, obviously, York is inspired by Dale Cooper. But that's not all he's inspired by. He is also inspired by Agent Rosenfield, Miguel Ferrer's character from Twin Peaks, and a third character that I would argue is a little bit of a inspiration for him, at least a character he takes traits from, that I cannot talk about because it would spoil both works. But if you're familiar with Twin Peaks, keep an eye on how York acts in this game, and you will notice he is not just Cooper. He is also Rosenfield. Now, this is a good time to talk about the Deadly Premonition beta, Rainy Woods. So, before it was Deadly Premonition, it was known as Rainy Woods. It was set for a 2008 release, and it featured even more obvious Twin Peaks influenced designs, if you can believe it. You had little old men in a red room with curtains in it, saying weird cryptic clues to the FBI agent. You had David Young Henning and his mysterious friend Jeter instead of York. And even the sheriff had a design that more closely resembled Sheriff Truman from Twin Peaks. It's very likely that the reason this game ended up getting pushed to 2010 was because they had to change a lot of this. Although this also could have been very early in development, I'm not sure, but... Oh my god, I didn't even notice the bare chest! Holy shit, when I put that on there, oh my god. But yeah, Deadly Premonition is already a flagrant Twin Peaks ripoff, and it was only going to be more of that back when it was called Rainy Woods. However, it seems like it was almost identical to the final game, and really all they had to change were some aesthetic things, and a few names, probably re-recording a few voice lines, because from the trailer, the voice actors are all the same. There is actually a 2007 Tokyo Game Show trailer that you can watch that shows off a lot of this. I don't want to show it on stream because it will spoil some scenes from the game, because again, it looks very similar to the final game, minus just some aesthetic shifts. This trailer also features the song Pillow Stains, which is maybe my favorite song from Deadly Premonition that was not in the original release of Deadly Premonition. But in the director's cut, they did sneak it in a couple places. I say that, I think there may also be an instrumental version of it that you can find as a little Easter egg in the original 360 release of Deadly Premonition. Now we gotta talk about something else. So, little bit of a spoiler warning here. This is something I've been very excited to talk about, and I'm going to be as vague as possible. And it's also stuff that, even though I don't want to spoil anything for people who are going in blind, I am comfortable talking about this, but if you still want to be just extra sure 100% blind, just mute until I'm done with the next slide. You can look at it all you want. You won't have anything spoiled for you just by looking at it. You'll be fine. But we have to talk about some other inspirations for Deadly Premonition. I'm gonna be doing that a lot. For Deadly Premonition, because crucially, it ain't just Twin Peaks that Deadly Premonition very explicitly borrows from. Now, I have not seen official confirmation that Swery borrowed from anything I'm about to talk about, but it is impossible. It is impossible that he didn't. And I've seen other people note this. Only a few, but I've seen a few people note these similarities. So, we have to talk about the Subaraya Ultraman series, specifically Ultra 7 and Ultra 7X. Now, Ultra 7 is an insanely influential show in Japan. Massively. Came out in the 60s. If you have ever consumed any Japanese media in your life, you should watch Ultra 7, because you will be shocked at how much borrows from it. Do you like Dragon Ball? That Chi-Chi's, like, beam thing that she had as a kid in her throwing blade? That's from Ultra 7. Do you like Pokemon? Do you like capturing monsters in a capsule? Ultra 7 came up with that. Ultra 7 has so much. And specifically, we have to talk about, for Ultra 7, The Targeted Town, an episode that came out in 1967. Also known as The Cursed Town, depending on the translation. This episode features the alien Metron trying to prepare for an invasion of Earth by testing out a plan in a small town in which they hide red seeds in cigarettes, and whenever someone smokes these cigarettes, they become enraged and violent, attacking everyone around them. I should also mention, this is a fabulous episode of television. Even if you have no interest in Tokusatsu or Ultra 7, go on Tubi and just watch The Targeted Town. It is fantastic. There's like gorgeous cinematography, amazing shots, genuinely eerie stuff. It's a very famous episode, and for good reason. It's fabulous. It's an episode that has to have referenced Deadly Premonition, but I will not go into any specifics, but if you know, you know, and if you don't know, just keep this in mind as we play through the game. Now, going forward to Ultra 7X, this was sort of a reboot, sequel, kind of an edgy adult one that they did in the early mid-aughts. And in this show, there was an episode called Blood Message from 2007. This episode features the alien Hubnath, who takes on the guise of the Red Coat Killer, a killer who only attacks when it rains. There's also a lot of references to the Hitchcock movie Psycho in this episode, with like a man dressing as a woman and, you know, their personality being split and causing them to kill, and, you know, a lot of that kind of stuff going on. It's also a very fun episode. I should mention, I think Ultra 7X has a little bit of a bad reputation. I think it's actually very good and takes the, we want to do an adult version of this kids thing in kind of the best way you can take it, where it's not just like edgy violence. They're actually like, have a couple episodes where there's just no fighting because there's no reason to fight, and the hero just kind of resolves things peacefully through dialogue or, you know, escorting people. Okay, but did Ultraman get that from something else, though? I don't know, but I'm going to guess that the killer in a red coat coming out when it rains is maybe unique to Ultra 7X. I don't know. If anyone else knows, tell me. But I don't know. Also, complete coincidence, not really relevant. These are both the 8th episode of these shows, which is kind of funny. But, yes. Just keep in mind, red seeds making people violent, and a killer in a coat that comes out when it rains. Ultra 7X, it's possible it's a coincidence. I doubt it, though. Ultra 7, that is explicitly, like, that's like Star Trek. That's like Star Wars for Japan. It is everywhere. It is influenced in everything. There's no way Swery wasn't aware of it, and it's one of the most famous episodes as well. Moving on, basic summary of what the deal is that we're doing here. I just want to see how well Deadly Premonition holds up after 10 years of not playing it, and so much changing with me, with the world, with Swery, you know, all this stuff. There's so much that's changed. I got a lot to come back to it with. I also want to see how it really compares to Twin Peaks, because this will be my first time playing through it with a full knowledge of original Twin Peaks. I'm even going through Laura Palmer's Diary, the audiobook, right now. I doubt that will come up, but I started that this week just to get a little extra in there, and because I want to. Twin Peaks is great, and I want more. It's been a fantastic listen so far. I also want to do more of the side stuff for the first time. One of the things that made me love Deadly Premonition is how effortlessly I was able to just blast through it. You know, a lot of games these days, even things I like, it feels a little bit like I gotta force myself to go through it, you know, before my ADHD decides, oh, I don't care about this anymore, you know. It's like a race against the clock in my brain, you know? But with Deadly Premonition, it was just effortless. I just loved it and went through it. No problem. I did a bit of the side stuff. There's some side stuff I always did for specific rewards or because it seemed interesting. But this time, I want to make an effort and try to do even more of the side content and see a lot of stuff I haven't seen. And this was supposed to be the 300 followers special 1 or 2 years ago, and now I'm almost at 400, so sorry! It took a while, I had stuff I wanted to do to get ready for it. Oopsie! But now we're here, so whatever. Now, a little bit less fun part. We gotta talk about the content warnings. It's an M-rated horror game, general violence, drugs, sexual stuff, you know. You're an adult, you understand. If you're not an adult, you shouldn't be here. There is some extreme transphobia in this game, and it's very weird. I can't even talk about why it's weird until we get to it, because it's going to be a spoiler. It's also, I would argue, like, violently transphobic, but then still in a way that's weird, and I can't say why it's weird. We'll just get to it. You have to take my word for it. We'll talk about all this as we come to it. There's also very graphic discussions of various kinds of abuse. And there's a lot of themes and implications of sexual assault happening in the game. There might even be more that I'm forgetting or that I never saw before because it was just in the side quests. So, you know, just be aware of that. And, surprise, surprise, a lot of this, maybe even all of it, is not handled very well at all. Please be aware of this if you're going to watch this playthrough. There's going to be a lot of stuff that's not great. There's stuff I specifically remember that I'm, like, dreading going to, either because it just sucks, or it's, you know... It's inspired by Twin Peaks, which has a lot of very, very heavy content and themes, but Twin Peaks handles a lot of them kind of well, I think. Or has a little bit more to say. Anyway, please just be aware of that. I will say, I think a lot of this doesn't really kick in until later in the game, so if you want to watch some of the start, I think you'll be fine. Might be a little bit weird when we get to the victim, you know? But a lot of the worst stuff doesn't happen until, like, much further into the game. So, if you want to watch some of the start and get a vibe, I think you'll be okay, but use your discretion, please. And that is it. Thank you all so much for watching my little presentation here. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it explained why this stream took so long to get going, and why this is so important to me.